Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today, as promised, a very special video. Now, first, I just want to say, yes, I'm going to get back to part 2 of my 500 subscriber Ask Me Anything. I just posted part 1. Some of you might be expecting part 2 today, but instead, we're going to something else that I've promised for a while. It is the latest haul video, but it's a very special haul video. I did a little bait and switch last time where for the number 50 I did my all Barbie video, which I hope you liked. But I teased that I'm going to have a very special haul video here to celebrate 2 years of this channel. And that's what we have today. The culmination, not just of the last 2 years of stuff that I've been getting on this channel, but actually many years of collecting, culminating in this massive haul, and it's romance. I've been building towards this huge romance thing for a while, and I wasn't expecting this to come together because some of these romance keys are really hard to find. But strange circumstances happened, and a bunch of things came up available in quick succession. And so today I'm super excited to bring you this video, and it's about the big 7 DC romance titles. Now, for those of you who have been watching my videos for a long time, you probably know what I'm talking about, but just to refresh your memory, in terms of romance comics, DC was sort of the last man standing. Charlton had a lot of romance comics as well for a long period of time, but DC, after the Comics Code came in, DC was sort of the standard bearer for romance comics. They had 7 romance titles that all lasted more than 140 issues, and they were all running simultaneously. So they had the titles Girls Love, Girls Romances, Falling in Love, and Secret Hearts were their original 4. And then in 1957, they bought Heartthrobs from Quality Comics when Quality went out of business. And then in 1963, I want to say maybe 64, but I think 63, they bought Young Romance and Young Love, the 2 flagship titles and the 2 original romance comic titles in comics from Prize/Crestwood. So by 63, they had all 7 of those titles running simultaneously. They all ran into the 1970s, and again, they all ran for over 140 issues. So for a long period of time in the 60s and into the early 70s, you had all 7 of these super long-running classic romance titles being published simultaneously. So when it comes to romance collecting, of course, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. There's a lot of people that focus on 50 stuff, like the Matt Baker stuff, the Atlas stuff. There's people that, there's a few people, including myself, who are into the Charlton romance books. But one of the big focuses of my collection has been the big 7 DC romance. Originally, I was going to try and put together a complete run of all of those, and I ended up just deciding it was unreasonable, and it was kind of ridiculous because a lot of them, I wasn't really even reading them. They have cool covers, but they do get a little formulaic. And so, as you know, I recently decided to sort of streamline my collection. The other part is because I was having breathing issues that were triggered in part by the mustiness of my romance comics, and in order to get a complete run of everything, I was having to buy all these really super low grade, as cheap as possible copies, and the romance comics were by far the mustiest part of my collection. You just open a box of the romance books and the must just hits you in the face. So what I did was I went through all of my romance titles. I picked out which ones I wanted to keep, and I made a checklist of which ones I wanted to buy. And then I sold off everything else that I had that was at a below a 4.5, basically. Anything I had that was a 5 or above, I kept, because those are much less likely to be musty. But all of the low-grade books, stuff with the rusty staples and the water damage and the mustiness and just the trashed stuff, I sold all of those, and it was hundreds of them, like over 200. And what did I do with that money? I focused it into this. And again, this is just a series of unexpected circumstances. Now, to set the stage for where I was in my romance collection before I show you the stuff I've just bought as part of this haul video, as part of the big 7 DC romance titles, I already had some of the first issues. So this is the first one that I got. I got this 3 years ago at a convention here in the area. It's Girls Romances #1. And this is, I changed the lighting to try and reduce the glare. This is Girls Romances #1. And I got this 3 years ago at a convention here. It's the same convention I got the Doctor Strange first appearance. This was $75, and I was very happy with it. It's a solid lower grade copy, presents really well. So this is the first of the big 7 DC #1s that I got. I then had some luck on the CGC forums. Again, low grade, probably a 2.5, Rusty Staples, but otherwise not bad at all. It's Secret Hearts #1. Now, these aren't the easiest to find. Some are easier than others, which I'll talk about in a minute. They're also the photo covers that some of these have make them a little bit less desirable to people that aren't hardcore romance collectors. When you get the really cool covers by the cool artists that are drawn, you get a lot of crossover appeal. But since these don't really have crossover appeal, they're only for hardcore collectors. So this is actually, I got this for $40, which I think is kind of ridiculous. Ridiculously cheap. And this has a date stamp on it, July 14, 1949. So again, it does have Rusty Staples, but it's a solid low grade copy of this. So I was very happy with that. Finally, I got this, the cheapest of them. It's kind of a placeholder. I got this on eBay for just $18. It's Falling in Love #1. This is the last of the DC Big 7 titles to be launched. It came out in 1957. This has a tear starting here that runs through the entire book. It's not just the cover. The whole book is torn completely in half from here, and it goes all the way to here. So it's about as low grade as you get, but it is complete, and for $18, I was happy with it. At some point, I want to get a nicer copy, but because this has the drawn cover, it looks like a Bruzy to me. It's more valuable, and honestly, this era of DC is harder to find than some of the earlier books. So I've only seen a couple of these come up, but to be honest, I've only seen a couple of all of these. Secret Hearts #1 I've probably seen the most of, but none of these are easy to find, and I have bid a couple times on a replacement for this and upgrade, and I haven't gotten it. So going into like the Thanksgiving last year, this is what I had for my Big 7 DC collection. I had these 3 #1s, which is fantastic. And then I was selling my romance books and downsizing in general and just trying to refocus my collection. And some stuff started popping up on eBay. And the first one that I managed to grab, and is probably maybe the best deal I got, is this. It's Girls Love Stories #1. Now this, it's hard to say, but it feels to me that like this is the most expensive of the DC, the 4 books that DC put out. More than Girls Romance, definitely more than Secret Hearts, more than Falling in Love. Girls Love Stories #1. Now this is a really solid copy. It's about a 4.5, maybe a 5. Real nice. One of the reasons I was able to get it so cheap is this is the Canadian edition. Now, the Canadian editions of the Golden Age books are different than the regular editions. They were basically published at the same time, so it's not like they were being reprinted like years later. However, they are smaller in that this has 2 stories in it instead of 3, so it's missing one of the stories. I haven't actually cracked this one open, but most of the Canadian editions are also in black and white instead of in color. So there's definitely a difference. As a result, the prices are significantly lower. Now, before I bought this, I checked into the stories because this issue does have an Alex Toth story in it. And this copy does have the Alex Toth story, which frankly probably looks better in black and white than in color anyway because of the way his art works. So I paid $150 for this. American copies in similar grade seem to be people are asking about $450. Again, it seems to be the hardest of the pure DC books to find and the most valuable and desired of them. So I was really happy to get a nice tight copy in this condition. Very excited. But not long after that, I got this. So that's all 4 of the DC books. The DC books do tend to be a little bit easier. Of the non-DC books, I definitely see this one more often than the others. It's Heartthrobs #1, which has this great cover. Great cover. The moon, the way the lace is drawn is just a great, great cover. Now, this does seem to come up a little more often than the others. Not often, but more often. This copy is a lower grade book. It's probably a 2.5 or, well, I think that's a little harsh. I'd say it's about a 3. A cleaning would definitely help this for sure, because you could see it's got it, like you can see on the moon, it's got a lot of dirt. But I think I paid around 125 or 130 for this. I had been outbid on copies at least twice before that went for over 150, so I was really happy to get this. I actually already have a Heartthrobs #2, but the issue 1, great cover, so I was super excited to get that. And then I stumbled on this on eBay, and I was shocked that I was able to get it. It's the only one that I've actually seen come up for sale. Now, of all of these books, this is definitely the one that I've seen the least. It's Young Love #1. And this was actually one of the cheapest ones that I got. It's low grade. It's definitely seen better days. It's got spine split at the bottom. It's rolled. It's dirty. It's got a little bit of a tear. It's probably only about a 2. You can tell from the way the spine is split at the bottom and top that there's a little bit of brittleness in places. But Simon and Kirby, from the editors of the Young Romance, Young Love #1. Young Love, probably my favorite of the titles. So I was very surprised to see it, but I was even more surprised that I was able to get it for just $70, which seems like just an absolute steal, just a criminal. So just stoked to get this. You've treated me like you do all the girls, Pete, with indifference and scorn. Yet tonight you kissed me. You love me, Pete, don't you? And then Pete, here's Pete. Pete, this isn't right, Karen. All women are deceitful and untrustworthy. You can't be any different. And then here's the woman in the back. She's wearing green, I think. I'm colorblind, but I think she's wearing green, so you can tell that she's the bad guy. Bravo, Peter. Now tell her the real reason why you became a woman hater. So, very excited, right? But wait. Are you guys ready? You must know what's coming after I've showed you these other 6. The ultimate romance grail. It's not the most expensive romance book. There's many, many books in romance that are more expensive because they have Matt Baker covers or something. But for me, the ultimate romance grail, the most important romance comic ever printed, one of my personal grails. Here it is. You know it's coming. I'm so excited. Ready for this? Dun 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 dun. Yes, it's Young Romance #1, the first ever romance comic ever published. Simon and Kirby. You can see it's a CGC 2.0. It's got a classic motif. There's so many romance covers after this, which are about an artist and the model. Look at the super sexy model, the way she's drawn, which almost has a bit of Matt Baker with the just the way it's done. But it's very clearly Kirby. Very clearly Kirby. No, Linda, we can't go on like this. You know I'm engaged to your kid sister, Jane. But darling, Jane is a child. She doesn't have the fire to kindle the spark of your genius. You need me, John. And then the kid's sister is in the background thinking, oh, John. How awesome is this, right? So, again, not a book that comes up very often. There had been a 7.0, a CGC 7.0 that was on eBay for quite a while. It was $2,000, and I just couldn't swing $2,000. But it was on my radar. I had been following it, and it did sell. It eventually sold for $2,000. And if you look at, if you have GPA, if you look at the listings, the sales history of Young Romance #1, you'll be shocked at how few copies have ever sold. Very few. It was hard to figure out what the value of this was because there had never been a 2.0 that had ever sold before. So, I had the money from selling these other romance books, but I also had there's a previous video I did about downgrading my Avengers 8. One of the reasons I did that was to free up the money because I wanted to buy this. So I had put up a thing on the CGC forum saying I'm looking for Young Romance #1, and someone immediately messaged me and said that there happened to be a Young Romance #1 in an auction that was currently going on online that only had a few days left. And so I went over there, and again, a 7.0 had just sold for $2,000, but there was no sales history ever for anything in this grade, so there's really no way to say. And with a lot of these books, as I've talked about before, there's a floor. There's an entry level. You're going to have to pay X to get any copy. And so the fact that a 7.0 is $2,000 really didn't tell me anything about what the floor was going to be to get in on it. And ultimately, I bid real high on it because I wanted to make sure I got it. I already had the rest of these, so I wanted to be 100% sure that I got this in my collection. So I went very high, and I ended up getting it for much less than I bid, which is fantastic. And that does not happen at all the auction houses, because some of the auction houses, Heritage, sorry, some of the auction houses are in states where it's legal to show bid on the auctions. So if I had been bidding on one of those sites, my bid would have been bid up by show bidders, being bid on by the people selling the books to make sure they get the top dollar. That didn't happen here. I still paid, well, you can see, I'm not sure if it's in GPA yet or not. I think the hammer price was 400 and it was like 420. It was 415, 420. But then, of course, there was some taxes and fees and shipping. So it was more like 465 after everything. But I had that money from downgrading my Avengers 8, because I sold that for $1,600 and I bought my new copy for $875. So I had like $700 to buy comics with, specifically that I had done that to buy comics and to buy this in particular. So I had the money, so I'm super excited. So there it is, all 7 of the DC Big 7 #1s. Here they are again: Young Love, Heartthrobs, Girls' Love Stories, Falling in Love, Secret Hearts, Girls' Romances. Now, just as a bonus, I also dug out from my collection, as I mentioned, DC bought 3 of those titles. So here's the first DC issue of Heartthrobs. It's Heartthrobs number 47, which I think is from 1957. So this came out right around the same time as Falling in Love #1. I think a little bit later, because the Falling in Love #1, I think, has a bigger Comics Code stamp. Young Romance 125, the first DC issue of Young Romance. The next issue, they start the Bonnie Taylor serial, but this first one, they don't have that. It's not on the cover. John Romita with the art. We also have Romita art. Let me take that back. I'm not 100% sure. This might be a Abruzzo. Doesn't matter. Young Love 39. First DC issue of Young Love, which kicks off the Mary Robin Registered Nurse storyline. So I have, in addition to the first issues, I also have the first DC issues of all these titles. So there it is. Years and years and years of romance collecting, questing, reconfiguring the collection, and all of that has led to this. I now have all 7 DC #1 issues, even though 3 of them weren't by DC. But I have the first issue of all 7 DC romance titles. So, and that was basically just about all DC did with romance. They do have a couple other short-run titles. Of course, they have the Gothic romances in the 70s, and I have those as well. But there it is. So let me know what you think down below. I'm so excited for these. I think you could probably tell that. It's been years and years and years and years of collecting to get my collection to this point. I still have a lot of stuff on my checklist from DC and lots of stuff from Charlton, because the Charlton stuff's really hard to find. So there's still plenty of romance left to come, but I'm hard at work right now. I'm hoping to have another romance video soon. There's one book in particular I'm just trying to find. When I get that, I'm going to have another quest video to show you guys where I have some really cool stuff to show you. But it's hard to get cooler than this. So thanks very much for watching. Thanks for joining me on this romance journey over the last couple years. There's still, again, plenty more romance to come, but I'm starting to get to the end of some of my biggest goals with the DC romance, and so we may be shifting focus a little bit into some of the harder to find Charlton stuff. I think the romance stuff is going to come slower now because there's just I'm starting to get what can be gotten. So thanks very much. I'll see you next time.